Tonight, the trend towards garishly coloured commercial buildings. Stewart Island gets the power on. And we venture off the beaten track with a party of Japanese tourists. Good evening. First, the plan to alter Dunedin's Octagon. The City Council is in the midst of a planning hearing right now to give people the chance to speak out about the Octagon. It's a follow-up to the city's own proposals to improve the Octagon, including closing the section in front of municipal chambers to traffic. It's expected the hearing will continue tomorrow night. A new trend towards vividly painted centre city shops has been raising a few eyebrows in Dunedin. The retailers say it's means of raising their profile and attracting business. But as Bernard Buck discovered, there are many not so keen on the idea, including City Council staff.
The new bright image is a trend started over the past year or so. It began on the city's outskirts as these firms took on the can't-be-missed look. Wilson Neal followed suit with their Moray Place spruce-up. Then the trend really took off as Smith City moved into town with its obvious yen for the yellow look. Now, the very centre of the city, the Octagon is having its turn as Nees and Butterfields join forces with their colour scheme. The bigger, brighter trend is one that's hard not to have an opinion about.
No, I don't like them. I think they lose a lot of the character.
It's quite nice. Some are quite revolting.
Oh, it makes a nice bright change in Dunedin. Some I don't like, some are all right.
I can't see any harm in brightness. I don't like darkness.
As for the firms themselves, they're all for the brighter colours. The general manager of this firm says yellow has the greatest impact of all colours and is part of its corporate image nationwide. He claims the firm has had nothing but favourable comment about its colours. City planner Bruce Duda says he's not against the use of bright colours. In fact, he believes they're needed, but they have to be used with sensitivity.
And I think that is the problem at the present time. People are applying bright colour to their properties without any real sensitivity either to the architecture that's already installed into the building and detailing, or in relation to the adjacent buildings.
Mr. Duda says more care is needed choosing colours, and they have to be in keeping with the surroundings. And he says some assessment should be made before colours are decided on.
Bright, garish colour used en masse is going to have disastrous effects upon our townscape. Now, we have one example in the Octagon where a building now is being painted up in bright colour. One just needs to imagine the Regent Theatre, other buildings within the Octagon framework being painted in bright colour, different colours, and I think you can imagine just what a mess we could end up with.
He says some Dunedin buildings have been enhanced by bright colours and points to the railway station as an example of a building that's been treated sensitively. Whether the City Council takes any action over colour schemes won't be decided until a special report's been considered.
Giant hydro schemes are so much part of the scenery, it's easy to assume everyone now has electricity at the flick of a switch. Although that's never been the case on Stewart Island, it will be soon. And as Gaynor Smith reports, the island's new power station is unlike any other on the mainland.
It's not just the bush clearing into which Stewart Islanders have tucked their power station that makes it different. Here you can forget about hydroelectricity and the national grid. The power supply being tested now in the new building is basically a giant version of the diesel generators chugging away in island households. And although burning diesel is an expensive way of generating electricity by city standards, 3 giant engines pumping out 200 kilowatts each do that more efficiently and cheaply. New Zealand's only powerhouse like it is on the Chatham Islands. But this one's totally automated, so generators will cut on and off in tune with the demand, run by computer. And its other special design features involve noise. Tuning an engine demonstrates its level inside, but hanging sound baffles from the ceiling and incorporating special vents in walls keeps much of it in here. Theoretically, it'll be no competition for the bellbirds in the bush. Electricity Stewart Island style will cost around 40 cents a unit. there's space for a fourth generator if needed later. For in spite of tests and checks, Works, the consultants overseeing the project, says there's still some guesswork about demand.
Once we get an idea of what the pattern is and what the load profile is of the consumers, how many toasters they're turning on in the morning and how many of them turn to using electricity in a large way, then they'll make a decision on the fourth engine, and that should see them right for quite a while.
Most islanders welcome electricity, but the power poles and lines going up through bush and beside beaches have brought soul-searching and breast-beating, much of it from people who live elsewhere. Putting transmission lines underground would have added $500,000 to the scheme's cost. In the choice between scenery and power poles, that was the crunch. Maybe later, some locals say. Let's see what can and can't be done once we're up and running. And predictions for when the first household generators can be switched off for good?
Well, as you see here, we're ready at the station end of things. There's a little bit more work and testing to be done on the reticulation scheme. But within another month, things will be up and running.
The man who organised Expo 88 is in Dunedin. Bob Roche is here to speak to the National Quantity Surveyors Conference about his experience as Expo project manager. It was a big job, as Jim Moore found out.
Expo, a huge undertaking, catering for up to 200,000 visitors a day. 40 countries vying for the hearts and pockets of world trade markets. New Zealand standing tall alongside her bigger neighbours. Razzle-dazzle on the surface, formidable organisation behind the scenes. The project director for Expo was Bob Roche. He organised the whole thing, put the team of experts together to stage it, oversaw the entire operation for 4 years, and had a budget of $150 million to do it with.
Yes, the budget actually started out at about 74, and it grew over the 4 years that I was involved in the project up to a final $150 million.
When you contemplated the sheer size of the task in front of you at the beginning, were you a bit apprehensive?
I think I'd have been more apprehensive knowing it was going to finish up at 150 million. But initially, yes, we were, because it's the first Expo that Australia's had since 1880 or 1888. So something like this comes once in a lifetime, and to be chosen as the successful project managers for the job, yes, we were quite apprehensive.
And of course, if it had fallen flat, heaven forbid, it would have been your reputation on the line, as it were.
Well, we took on a big task. We offered to the Expo Authority a role of being project manager, responsible for the total design and construction. We had to guarantee the end cost, and we had to guarantee to bring it in on time, and we had to guarantee to fulfil the brief, which meant creating a very exciting environment.
And not many visitors would disagree with that. One fact that might interest Stan Roger is that in 4 years of construction, only 2 hours were lost through industrial action. Expo looks very high-tech, as well as looking very glossy. How complex was it in terms of design and construction?
In reality, not that complex. The structures themselves were fairly basic. They had to be designed in a fashion that had reuse after Expo. The services that are in the ground themselves were not complex, only in magnitude. Electricity, for instance. We have 25 megavolt amps of power to the site, which is sufficient to light up a town of about 30 to 40,000 people.
Wow. And from a parochial point of view, what does the Expo main man think about the New Zealand pavilion?
I think it ranks around about equal first with Canada and Queensland. And again, that's pretty parochial.
That's high praise, though, yeah.
Well, the people themselves are demonstrating that. They're waiting up to 5 hours in a queue to get inside the New Zealand pavilion.
Would you do it again?
That's a very good question. Not next month. I think I'd leave it for a while.
And I'm one of the lucky ones who'll see it all next month. Now, today's temperatures and a look at a hoarfrost in Central. At 3 o'clock today, Half Moon Bay was cloudy with 11 degrees. Invercargill cloudy and 10. Gore cloudy and 10. Balclutha overcast 11. Dunedin partly cloudy 11. Palmerston fine at the high today of 12. Oamaru sunny and 11. Ranfurly fine and 7. Queenstown fine and 6. Wanaka partly cloudy and 5. Alexandra cloudy 3. Taiana fine and 10. And the expected highs for tomorrow are Dunedin 11 and in Invercargill 10 degrees. There have been lots of movies filmed around Queenstown recently, and one of the big budget ones, George Lucas's fantasy Willow, looks set to be a box office hit. Lucas did let us in on the set, but he kept the plot a mystery, and apparently it's paid off. Willow's opening weekend in the States saw it pulling in bigger audiences than Raiders of the Lost Ark. But that was before the reviews. Here's what Entertainment This Week had to say.
I mean, I do think it's derivative, and I do think that it's a little dramatically diffused. But I think, from a standpoint of of adventure, of the charm of the Willow character, and especially for a spectacular, what I would guess to be like a half-hour finale, one thing after another, I do think it's the perfect, probably 6 to 13-year-old movie.
Japanese tourists are among the biggest spenders to visit New Zealand, but cultural differences, like language, often mean they don't actually get to meet many locals. Now, as Bryn Somerville reports, a farming couple from South Westland are out to break down the barriers.
South Westland's definitely gumboot country, but most locals with an opinion, and that's just about everyone, argue that the weather's part of what makes the place great to visit. Mention tourism, Japanese or otherwise, in South Westland, and the locals will probably groan and say it's going about as well as the flagging forestry industry. Too many outsiders making the decisions. This year the traditional bus 'em through visitors are staying away in droves. The government corporation hotels shut for the winter, and industry people say spending's down 30%. An old shearing shed near Wataroa wouldn't occur to most people if they were going looking for the cutting edge of tourism in South Westland. But at this time of year, and with the local industry in the doldrums, that's exactly what this is. On a small farm just north of Franz Joseph, a semi-retired sheep farming couple reckon they've got a good little business scheme where just about everyone will get a cut, except the hotels. Jim Purcell says he's nothing special. Just a farmer getting on in years who doesn't want to retire in Hokitika. Jim will be an integral part of the act that Glenys Purcell's putting together, even if his language skills aren't great.
There's a mama sign sheet. And the age, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 teeth. 6 teeth. When sheep, one more year, 8 teeth.
Glenys Purcell's been steaming up and back from Japan for quite a few years now. She's a good spinner and has been invited there a number of times to show off her skill. Now she's bringing them to her home in the great outdoors of South Westland. Her first trial group's a big one. Some are being billeted by neighbours, but Glenys eventually hopes to have groups of 6 for her woolcraft holidays. Glenys says they'll use the bad days to teach dyeing methods, spinning technique, felting and weaving. Jim's geared up to show off his shearing technique and take the groups around the sites on good days. They say they aren't out to rip the visitors off. Unlike most holidays the Japanese buy to New Zealand, this one allows the craft-oriented tourists to spend what they want, when they want.
Well, we're not really in it for money, we're in it to try and keep South Westland as a tourist centre viable, and at the moment it's not.
Can you see specific things that could be done better?
People are doing the same things today as what they done 50, 60 years ago. We haven't progressed really at all. We've given them better accommodation maybe, but we certainly haven't given any other types of recreation.
Glenys says her courses will cost the same for all nationalities. She thinks there's a good market in Japan for her kind of holiday, and she has her own ideas about what Japanese visitors expect.
I don't think it's very fair, and that they get pushed on the buses and go to the same type of hotels, and their complaint to me is that they eat the same kind of food, and they might start in Auckland and never speak to a New Zealander and leave the country without actually having spoken to an average New Zealander.
As for the Japanese women, some haven't had a holiday for years, and although they were armed with as many cameras as New Zealanders have come to expect, they're also keen to mess in and lend a hand. There are no complaints about the country cooking or the weather, and they'll go home as the best advertising South Westland could get. Happy, satisfied customers taking back some dinkum down under culture.
Very good.
And sayonara from us too. Good night.